Good morning, students. I hope you're doing well and having a wonderful, wonderful day. We are getting ready to get started on our essay writing, but before we do that, it's really, really important that we talk about what common language is. And so I want to start by asking you, how many of you have been in a class where you hear the teacher talking and they're using this language and you feel that you're supposed to know what that language is, but you're just not quite sure. And it almost feels like they're speaking a different language that you don't understand. Well, to try to eliminate that issue, we are going to talk about just some words that you're going to be hearing me say really often throughout the semester. And that way you have a really good tool to come back to as you're navigating some of your feedback, or when I'm talking in class, you can reference what some of these words mean. So, first, I want to start with just the basic parts of an academic essay. So, there are three main parts. The first paragraph is what we call your introduction. The body paragraphs that explain that introduction are going to be between the introduction and the conclusion. And for every essay, this is going to look different. You should have a minimum of three body paragraphs. But as you continue to cultivate your writing skills, you will end up writing papers that may have six body paragraphs, eight body paragraphs. If you're in graduate school, this could look like 20 body paragraphs. But that is ultimately to explain what you stated in that introduction. And then the conclusion is the end part that wraps everything up. So, first, let's talk about this introduction component. This is where you are going to introduce what you are going to be talking about in this essay. And it really consists of three main parts. First, you're going to read the hook, and that hook is what we call the attention grabber. Okay, that attention grabber is really going to make the reader sink their teeth into, oh, I want to read this essay. It can be funny, it can be a quote, it can be a startling statistic, but the goal of the hook is to really kind of force the reader's hand into wanting to read your essay. Then we go into what we call the transition or background information. Guys, this is really just to give your reader a synopsis of, hey, this is a little overview. It's not necessarily the most important information of the paper, but it's to get their feet wet into what the paper is going to be about. And then perhaps the most important part of the essay is going to be that thesis statement. And the thesis statement is the main idea, the argument, the purpose, the statement, the big kahuna as to what that essay really means. Often the thesis is found at the end of an introduction. And the reason why I want you to consider this, I want you to think about like when you are talking to someone and they're telling you a story. That last little bit of information they leave you with is really what you remember the most, right? And so the thesis goes at the end as kind of that punchline to tell the reader, this is what I'm going to be writing about. So I want to give you an example of what these things look like played out in terms of an argumentative essay. So this particular example of an argumentative essay is about whether or not fully online education is a viable option for the present and the future. So let's take a look at this example introduction. It's as simple as logging on. Students from all over the country are learning to take control of their own education through the power of the internet. Gone are the days when a student must get up, get ready, and sit in a classroom to learn and obtain a degree. Today, they have the capability to learn from their kitchen table, their car, or even waiting in line at the DMV. They can take their education anywhere. While many are questioning whether online learning is a viable, ethical, and realistic way for a student to obtain education, the proof is in the outcomes that the education system is already seeing. Online education is the future of education. Online education should continue growing and improving due to the inclusive nature it provides for so many students, the flexibility it offers to those who must work while obtaining a degree, and the way it shapes students to be more technologically advanced for their future workforces and places. So, guys, this is an example of what an introduction looks like. And what I want you to see, the first few sentences, that's what we call the hook, okay? You're drawing the reader in, you're trying to get them to understand how important this idea is, but it's really to grab their attention. So, the idea of logging on, the DMV, those are attention grabbers. Then the green is where we have a little bit of background information, okay? Why is this essential? Why is this something worth writing about? And then that yellow is what we call the thesis statement. It is the main idea of this paper. And in this case, the argument is that online learning is, in fact, the future of education. So now let's talk about a body paragraph. Every body paragraph should have a couple of these main ideas. Number one, the first sentence of a body paragraph is a topic sentence. And that indicates a clear transition to a new idea that goes back, guys, and supports that thesis statement. A body paragraph should also have supporting claims or details. And guys, that takes 3 to 5 sentences. So if we're seeing body paragraphs that are only 2 sentences long, 3 sentences long, we know we're not giving enough detail to that idea. Something is not quite right. And then the last sentence of a body paragraph is that summative sentence that closes that idea and it shows the reader, hey, I'm done talking about this and I'm moving on to something new. So let's take a look at this same essay, a body paragraph example. Now I want you to remember our introduction, the thesis indicated that online learning was the future of education. So let's see how this body paragraph is going to support that idea. Online learning provides an incredible opportunity for teachers to create an inclusive environment, one that allows all students to feel comfortable in their learning experience. Online education has many tools that can help students who need various accommodations. For example, there are great online techniques to help with hearing impairments. Teachers can use inclusive software that allows students to read what they are saying on YouTube. The subtitles allow students to take their time in reading, and the teacher can guide them through the lectures using visual aids. Another great example to consider are the students who have anxiety when speaking in class. Discussion boards offer an opportunity for all students to be heard. These students can voice their opinions, analysis, and challenges without the anxiety-provoking methods of hand raising or attempting to speak in front of an audience. There are many times when 1 or 2 students dominate class discussion, and discussion board tools are great ways to ensure all classroom voices are heard. When considering the multitude of ways that online learning creates inclusivity, it perhaps exceeds what a teacher is even able to do in an in-person learning environment. You guys, when we look at this body paragraph example, I want you to note the first couple of sentences really outline that topic. It points back to the idea that online education is the future. Then we have these really clear-cut examples. The writer gave us examples about students with hearing impairments and also students who struggle with anxiety. They showed us how online education can support those students. And then finally, the last sentence closes that idea and indicates to the writer, hey, we are finishing this thought up. The final piece is called the conclusion. And what I do want to note before we get to the conclusion, there should be multiple body paragraphs that look like this, okay? All that have different ideas that point back to that thesis statement in the introduction. So we should never have an essay with just one body paragraph. Remember, a minimum of 3, but it could be up to however many points that you're trying to make. So when we get to that conclusion, the conclusion only has 2 main jobs. Number 1 is the restatement of thesis, and number 2 are the closing remarks. Depending on the genre of the essay, conclusions may have different ideas. Some conclusions may call the reader to act. Some may pose a question for the reader, and some simply maybe just wrapping the paper up. But the biggest job of the conclusion is it's telling the reader, hey, this essay is coming to an end. There are no more new ideas to share. So let's take a look at this same essay example, what a conclusion may look like. Inclusive environments, flexibility, and a growing confidence when using technology are concepts that just scrape the surface when considering the absolute necessity of advancing online education. The impactful reality of technology is there is a constant opportunity to grow and evolve to make life better for everyone. This is what education needs to continue considering when there are questions as to the effectiveness of an online learning platform. There is no limit to how far education can continue to develop for those who would not be able to attend school without this online opportunity. Online education is the future of education. So, guys, what we see there is we see this restatement of thesis at the beginning, but it's not in the exact same words, but it does share the same idea. And then we have these closing remarks. We're wrapping it up. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about with all of these ideas and in writing a paper, we can't begin to know what goes into that paper if we don't fully understand audience and diction. So diction is the best thought of the style of writing, and it's really the other word is used is your written voice. Guys, one of the things that students come into English 111 and 112 misunderstanding is they think that writing a paper means that your goal is to sound smart. And what I want to share with you today is we have to understand the goal of your paper. When we consider ideas like a eulogy, which is the essay that you're going to write first, the goal of the eulogy is to connect with the audience and the people who loved that person. So what that means is our language should sound different than as if we were writing an argumentative research paper. Diction are word choices, tone, perspective, and that should always change depending on the purpose of the paper. So we're going to end this Edpuzzle by doing an activity together. I want you to consider purpose, diction, and audience. Imagine that you are back in middle school and a food fight is breaking out. I want you to tell me, what would you share with these 3 different people? After you complete this Edpuzzle, you're going to see an assignment right below, and it's going to ask you to share with me how you would talk about a food fight. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture. I hope you found it helpful. Please feel free to ask any questions at the end of this Edpuzzle, and I'm looking forward to a great semester as we start working through these concepts.